echoes from Kublai's day. During the 1960s, archaeologists dug down to find large sections of the old streets and foundations. For a brief period, it was possible to get a glimpse of the remains of pavilions, temples, and statues. The scholars worked quickly to catalogue their discoveries before it was all covered up and built over. The only other physical legacy of the old capital were the great walls that once embraced it. Like a great many relics from the past, they were pulled down during the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s. The last of the great city gates were bulldozed to make way for a freeway. But with the aid of the archaeologists' records and modern computer animation, it's possible to recreate Kublai's greatest success. This was Dadu, the great middle capital, Kublai's ultimate gift to his subjects. It was the perfect Chinese city, built upon Confucian ideals. It was built within a perfect rectangle. The boundary walls ran for 24 miles. Each faced either exactly north, south, east, or west. Inside were two smaller compounds which contained the inner city and the imperial city. The inland harbor swept right up to the trading district. There, rows of warehouses were constructed along a grid of boulevards which designated separate districts for artisans, merchants, and foreigners. Parks and gardens dotted the landscape. But the heart of Dadu was the great imperial city. High officials and envoys entered the inner sanctum from the south, the traditional Chinese approach, through one of 12 city gates. From there, they traveled nearly 2 kilometers down the imperial way towards Kublai's palace. This road passed through the middle compound, which housed government departments and the homes of civil servants. Just beyond the Huzai Gate, they crossed a series of bridges and continued to the gate of the palace city. In the gate itself were housed more senior ministries, government records, and imperial galleries. Passing through here, the visitors entered the private world of the great Khan. The inner palace city consisted of 3 main halls or pavilions where Kublai gave audiences, conducted court ceremonies, and more private affairs. But for Kublai and his immediate family, these pavilions were never really home. A large area was reserved to the east and planted with grass from the Mongolian steppes, and here they pitched their traditional gurs. This was Kublai's real home, and where visiting Mongol princes preferred to stay, under felt roofs. Here traditional shaman ceremonies took place under the disapproving gaze of the Confucians. In the midst of his ideal city, this was Kublai's affirmation of his nomadic heritage. But the real image of Dadu was an awe-inspiring walled city, which projected immense wealth and imperial power. The source of all imperial power was the area of the three main pavilions, the Yud Hall, Gongchen Hall, and the greatest of them all, Daming Dian. This was built on a raised structure that placed it at the top of a girdle of carved marble stairs and balustrades decorated with dragons and phoenixes. The inside was even more elaborate. According to records, there were golden dragons, red mullion windows, gold leaf everywhere. At the rear, at the end of a long corridor, was a private throne room where the most important guests were received. From these balconies, Kublai would greet his subjects during annual festivals and watch as they kowtowed before the most powerful man on earth. But building Dadu was only the beginning. It had to be populated, and not just by merchants and traders. For Dadu to succeed, it had to attract families from the traditional ruling class. Kublai's solution was to turn Dadu into a city of culture, and he would be the greatest patron. Throughout the capital, he built public theaters, and he sponsored companies to perform in them. Kublai himself greatly enjoyed the theater, and his regular presence elevated its importance within society. Hundreds of companies toured the country with a growing repertoire of new works. Drama became more colloquial. It dealt with stories about ordinary people. This was an era of tremendous literary development. One of Kublai's other great passions was painting. He commissioned hundreds of new works. This is Kublai himself at the hunt. His reputation would have shone without a blemish, but he could not ignore his Mongol heritage. He yearned for yet further conquests. This would have been the view from the shores of Hakata Bay in Japan on a summer morning in 1281. Before the Japanese defenders, there appeared a massive armada containing nearly 150,000 men. They had been sent by Kublai to conquer Japan. This was the second such expedition. 6 years before, another invasion fleet had been scattered by a great storm. But this time, with more men and ships, success should have been assured. But the Japanese defenses were much stronger than expected, and the invading army, most of whom were Chinese, had little enthusiasm for the campaign. The invaders struggled bitterly for months to breach the defenses. Then, just when it seemed Kublai's forces would prevail, another great storm blew up. For the second time, the gods of nature thwarted Kublai's hopes. The Mongol fleet prepared to evacuate, but as the soldiers tried to clamber on board, they were cut to pieces. Those that did manage to escape were drowned, for almost the entire fleet was sunk. It was the most humiliating defeat in Mongol history. Nearly 80,000 men went to the bottom. The occasional remnants of Kublai's ambition are still washed up on the beaches. To the Japanese, Kublai's disaster was of enormous significance. The typhoon was no accident. It was a divine wind, kamikaze, sent by the gods to save Japan. This garden near Hakata Bay is filled with shrines dedicated to the defenders and to the gods who acted on Japan's behalf. Here is enshrined the belief that the gods would never allow Japan's enemies to conquer and occupy her territory. It helped to forge the Japanese belief in themselves as being different to all other peoples, special, protected by the gods. The disaster at Hakata Bay was only one of a number of humiliating defeats that brought little comfort to Kublai during his last years. The end of his life was spent in an alcoholic haze, shrouded in disappointment and shame. When he died in 1294, the empire had seen the last of the truly great descendants of Genghis Khan. In the foothills of the Chinese northern highlands, where the Mongol army first broke through into China, there is a small stone archway. It was set up by Kublai's successors as a lasting tribute to Mongol control of China. On its walls, alongside Buddhist figures, are accounts in 3 languages of the Mongol conquest and the lives of Yuan emperors. But the real and lasting legacy of the Mongol domination of China is here, the Forbidden City in modern Beijing.